originate from the Gravitate Co-working Studio, sponsored by Revelton Distilling Company.
This Three Beards Media podcast may contain mature themes, and if you're not down with that, we got 3 words for you. Like the podcast. Nailed it!
Would you like to sample some of my nuts?
Hello, and welcome back to another edition of Old Man Strength on the Three Beards Media Network. This is Chris Shipley, your host. My co-host, Aaron Wall. Aaron, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing good, Chris. I've decided that now I'm offended by the fact that I'm staring at a drink in the intro, not just my bald head, but that I'm just staring at a drink longingly, apparently.
Listen,
like I think you're just using me as your whipping boy in this stuff.
I'm just telling you, man, you can send over a new photo, but that was the best one I could find I stole off your Facebook page. The only other things you have out there are ones from like 20 years ago where you look like you're young.
There are
and
no
you have
good
hair.
photos of me. Yeah.
So what can I say? I'm stuck with what I got to work with. So
yeah, that's fair.
So, well, we're going to have a really fun show today. I've been trying to get this gentleman on for a year. He's super busy, so we don't want to delay anybody because nobody's here to see us anyways. So
correct.
But we are really thrilled to have on the pod Keith Murphy, sports director, WHOTV13, Murph and Andy, Sound Off. I don't know what godfather of local sports radio is that right, Keith?
Maybe risking most overexposure, but glad to be here.
I mean, I guess you could fight Godfather. You can fight that name with John Walters. You guys can battle it out for that name.
I think John gets that. Yeah, I think John gets that. He's got a couple of years on me and a great reputation, and we all have to kiss the ring.
There you go. Well, probably the best thing to start. I give you a brief little introduction, but why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, what all you're doing, and we can go from there.
Well, I work a couple of jobs, as you pointed out, on both radio and television. I've been at WHO13 as a sports director there and hosting Sound Off for nearly 30 years now. And been doing the radio show with Andy, the Murph and Andy show, for 15 years now. And like you guys, I think quite a bit of my time is taken up by something that doesn't really pay and isn't a job, but now feels like it's part of the job, which is social media, whether it's X, formerly Twitter, or Facebook or Instagram. It just seems to keep us all busy, even beyond the normal jobs we have. But I'm really fortunate to have had a career this long, and I've enjoyed it, and I'm still having fun. I still love it. So it certainly has changed in those decades, but in a way that I've enjoyed, and I'm willing to find out what's next.
Am I remembering right? You started at WOI TV Channel 5, though. Is that right?
I did. It wasn't my first job, but it was my first job in Iowa. And
right.
when I went there, I had never been to Iowa. I took the job over the phone and pulled a U-Haul behind my Honda Civic to what I thought was Des Moines, Iowa, because the market was Des Moines. And sure. I knew the station said Ames, but I'm thinking like Waukeer, Johnston. I'm thinking suburb. And I was driving up through Des Moines and was following the signs to Ames. I was like, God, I hope I haven't missed it, because this is the old open up the map and risk your life to, to find out where you're going days. There's no GPS. Nobody has the Garmin or anything like that. You opened up the old paper map, and then tried to fold it back together. So I didn't really realize where I was going, but it turns out that, I was on the campus of Iowa State University. Back then, the station was right there across from the old Armory. And that's where I went to work initially and learned so much and worked with some great people there and made many lifelong friends. About 3 or 4 years into it, we moved the station down to Des Moines, much to the chagrin of people in Ames and the north part of the DMA. But that is where I started. Yeah.
Now, what time frame would that have been roughly?
1990 is when I started there. So long time ago, but it had been 90 to 96. I went to WHO 13 in 96.
Okay,
Summer.
So that makes it basically between when you and I were in Ames, Chris.
Yeah.
That was by design. That was by design. You guys already, they had warned me.
I'm sure. Well, I don't know. I wasn't on campus much because I got kicked out, but that's a whole nother story. So I
got there in the fall of 96.
So first time in Iowa. So where you grew up in Florida, right?
I grew up in Vermont. I was born in Vermont, and early part of my life was there. And then we moved to Florida. I went to high school in Florida, Central Florida. Worked at Disney World in high school a little bit. Then I went to college at Valdosta State University, which is on the Florida-Georgia line, but not affiliated with the country music duo. And that was where I got my first job. I got my first job in an ABC affiliate there in Valdosta, tiny station. Had pro wrestling on the weekends. Only did the newscast Monday through Friday. And they'd clear the set out of there, set up a rink in our news studio, surround it with folding chairs, and we would have pro wrestling on the weekends. Just give you a little idea of what that station was like. But it was perfect for me because I was in over my head. I didn't know what I was doing, and I was allowed to make a lot of mistakes and learn on the job and try about anything I wanted to. Like I said, I'd like to do a high school football show on Friday nights because high school football in Georgia is, as I'm sure you guys know, huge. So they were like, sure, go ahead. They'd say yes to anything. And that's a great environment to learn, because a lot of what I did at this tiny station in Valdosta, knowing what I know now, I would think, well, we can't do that. We don't have enough people. That's not possible. I need to also have a life. But back then it was just, do whatever you want. And I look back on some of it and I try to never watch it because it's really uncomfortable, because so much of it is just flat out bad. But it is how you learn. Repetitions.
Yeah. You have the ability to go back and see how far you've come. So tell me a little bit about, let's start kind of growing up. What was home life? I always like that Aaron and I and the previous host Tim always kind of talk about our dads and things like that, and that's always a fun topic and get some memories. But tell me what it was like growing up as Keith Murphy.
Okay, before I do that, I can see I'm on a hassle text chain right now. I'm hearing the ding. It's not going to stop anytime soon, so that means I need to turn my messages off here, right?
Yeah.
Is that correct? Okay, let me see how I do that. Quit. Okay, it's hopefully that did it. I just hit the quit thing, and it
there
should.
You go.
Yeah. All right. Because
somehow he's trying to steal the spotlight from you, and you're on somewhere else. Typical hassle.
He has no idea I'm on, I'm sure, but I'm telling you, so on this chain is Chris Williams, Scott Sipker, Andy Fales, and Hassel. And once Hassel gets going, it doesn't stop. There'll be 18 messages in the next half hour. You'll never hear from Andy. Andy never chimes in unless there's something extreme. Sipker pretty frequently. Williams depends on what's going on in his life because he has a crisis every couple of hours. So back to my home life as a kid. That was a question, right?
Yeah.
Absolute sports fanatic, like in a way that, as I look back on it, was probably unhealthy. Like my whole life revolved around sports. My my identity in high school was sports and playing sports. I took it way too seriously. Um, I I pouted when I lost. A loss would ruin my weekends. My whole life revolved around sports. My relationships finished second to sports. I still hear the ding, so that didn't go off. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I'm gonna tell these guys. Hang on. You keep dinging. Please take me out on air. Thanks. Do you think they'll take me out?
Yeah, this is the most important show you're going to be on all day, Keith. Tell them that.
I'm trying to see how seriously I'm taking it. These guys aren't going to do it. So one of the things that happened is my college was great for me, because a lot of people, they think of high school as the best years of their life, but I was so into sports, and as I said, like in a way that I don't think was healthy, and my identity was wrapped up in that. I just, when I got to college, it was like a whole new world. Nobody knew who I was. And I played football for 1 year, but I got hospitalized, and my football career was over after a neck injury. And then I just started playing intramurals. I started playing for fun. I started to see the whole sports experience in a whole different light. And it kind of changed my life from that point on. And I wish I could go back and approach it differently as a kid. I'm still a work in progress. I'm always trying to learn as I go. But the thing I try to really have my kids understand is that sports should be fun, and you want to win, you want to do your best, but it shouldn't feel like pressure. It shouldn't be life or death all the time. And that's kind of the way I treated it. My parents, by the way, were fantastic. They went to I played 4 sports most of my years, even as a kid, and they were at every game and usually every practice. And they were not helicopter parents or sports parents that yelled at officials or put pressure on me. They just wanted me to be happy, but they knew how much I loved it, so they completely supported me. So they were wonderful, and I learned so much from them. But I guess the thing I take away from my child is I wish I had just had more fun and not put the kind of pressure on myself I did. And when I was at a class reunion, I was talking to people about this, and they were just like, oh, I don't really know what you're talking about. So some of this might be internal, but I think most of us look back on our lives and think, now that I know what I know, I wish I had done this differently. And that's one of the things I wish I had done differently.
That's interesting, because I grew up such a big sports fan, and my girls were not necessarily big sports fans. And I remember my oldest one got to an age where she played soccer every year, and I could tell she just wasn't enjoying it. It wasn't any fun. And we were getting to that age now where you're playing sports now for competitive reasons, less than fun, right? 14, 15 years old. And I remember sitting down with her, and I said, now's the time to make a decision. If you want to keep playing, it's going to get serious. These kids are going to be serious, and it's not, you can't miss practice and things like that. But if that's not what you want, you need to make the decision. And she kind of admitted to me that she was playing more because she thought I would be disappointed. And that was one of the first times that I had to recognize that you look up to your parents and you don't want to disappoint them. And sometimes you have to let them know, listen, it's okay. This is your life, not mine. You go do what you want to do and enjoy it. It's fine. So it's kind of a different perspective there. So
yeah, it's good you had that awareness, though, because not everybody does. And I know, and my parents always let me know, they didn't care what I did. They just wanted me to be happy, and they were always supportive. And I wish I had kind of taken that more to heart because they were right about their approach. And, I was one of those kids, and there are kids all over right now that think they're going to be in the NFL or they're going to play Major League Baseball or something. You're delusional when you're young for the most part. I mean, it's a tiny percentage of people that even get a college scholarship to a D1 school, let alone make it all the way to the pros. It's a very exclusive club. And we see it everywhere right now. There are so many parents who are wrapping up not only their kids' hopes and dreams, but in some cases the parents' hopes and dreams that this kid becomes a professional athlete someday, and it's highly unlikely. So enjoy yourself, enjoy the sports, enjoy your time with your friends. It's like if you talk to a kid about Little League Baseball, a lot of the kids will tell you the thing they enjoy least is the parents. They're just trying to have fun. Most of them,
Right.
Most of the kids are just there to be with their buddies, hang out, have fun. And they're not there to feel pressure. They're not all wrapped up in it. They're not yelling at the umpires and stuff. And I think we could probably all do better to back off that a little bit and just let kids have fun.
Sure.
Yeah, I've had to have that conversation with some parents when I was an athletic director back in Iowa, and explain to them the odds, and say, are you willing to wrap up tens of thousands of dollars on a less than 1% chance of something happening? They commit to this. I was like, if you want to do it for fun, that's great. But some of them were banking on it being a college scholarship or this, that, or the other. I'm like, it's just, the odds are not in your favor to mortgage yourself into debt for this kind of stuff. And we see people doing it all the time now. It's crazy town.
It is. And it seems like if you are a good enough athlete, usually they'll find you anyway, even not in every case, but usually they'll find you. I mean, we see that in Iowa. There are some schools that lack the resource, like Des Moines North does not have the resources of Dowling or Valley or Centennial or Waukee Northwest, but there are players who go from Des Moines North to Division I scholarship football. And we see examples like that everywhere. I know it certainly can help you to be a part of that big machine of youth sports, but if you've got the goods in time, it seems like usually you can find a shot.
Yeah. Getting a couple questions, which will turn into the next topic that I wanted to hit. But first of all, Dave wants to know if you tweet all your stuff, or is there anyone in the background, because you seem to be all over the place. I'm not sure how you keep up with it all.
Oh, I tweet all my own stuff. I do all my own writing, post all my own stuff. There's nobody else to do it. That'd be nice. If there was, I'd take an assistant. But if there was somebody that could help me with it, I would be transparent about that. I wouldn't have someone posting on my behalf and not let people know it's someone else. I think that'd be disingenuous.
Sure.
That'd be funny, though. That's a really hot take from Keith on this. He's like, that wasn't me.
So actually, that kind of leads into my next question. And Denny kind of, one of our listeners had popped it in the comments as well. You're so busy. Part of the conversation that you and I had before this is that you like to give time to your family and so on, because you have such limited time. How did you meet Jenny? And let's hear about that, because you guys are. I love that you guys are so open about your vacations and your family and things like that. And I think, obviously, as a side point, I want to tell you how glad I am to hear that your son is doing better. I know he was having some trouble down there health-wise in Arizona, so I'm glad to hear that he's doing well. But let's talk about Jenny and your family and how you met her.
Well, she probably won't love me sharing this story, but we're Jenny and I are a blended family with 6 boys, and we each have 2 and adopted 2, so we had six total. But back when we met, it was nearly 20 years ago, and I was out eating with my parents, and there was a really loud, turns out they'd been partying all day. It was Jenny and her aunts and cousins. It's just a really loud table to our right. And at some point, a drink arrived at the table, and the waitress there said, "This is from a Star Bar," where it was. I can't think of the name. Star Bar in Des Moines, it's on Ingersoll, and they said, "This is from that table, but I'm not allowed to tell you who." And I looked over to my parents, and I said, I wish it would be her, but I'll bet it wasn't from her. But it was her. It was Jenny, because she was just this really personable, funny, pretty. I mean, I was just instantly attracted to her whole personality and all of that. So that is how we met. She hit on me. She sent the drink. Yes, she came after me. And it kind of just took off from there, and it's been a real blessing for me. I'm so thankful. In my relationships in the past, I've learned a lot from some of the mistakes I've made, and sometimes focusing on the wrong things. But I'm thankful, like most of the mistakes and missteps that I've taken in my life, I'm appreciative, because it has led me to where I am now. Like I am thankful for Jenny every day. Like I appreciate her so much. And 25 years ago, I probably wouldn't be. I probably would take her for granted. But now, I know how great we are for each other. I know how much I enjoy spending time with her. I love our travels together. We're finally empty nesters, and we're traveling more. And she's just a blast. And sometimes knowing you've got a good thing takes realizing some of the perspective you have of how fortunate you are. So I'm truly thankful, because we don't go to the Star Bar that night. Maybe we never meet. Maybe I don't have as much happiness as I have in my life. So I don't ever want to take that for granted, because I'm lucky. I'm lucky to have her, and I hope she feels the same. She seems like she does.
Little do you know that Jenny's our next guest, and we're going to ask her if she feels the same way. No, I'm just kidding.
I hope so.
I kind of I don't know. I relate a little bit to that story. I'm also in a blended family. Stacy and I met 14 years ago. She had 2 little boys. I had 2 girls. And I wouldn't even think that they aren't, that we are a blended family. It's just our family. You know what I mean? That's
Right.
But to your point, as far as recognizing your mistakes and things like that, I had a conversation with Caitlin, my youngest daughter, just a couple weeks ago, because we were talking about her mom, and I said, sometimes when you have those instances, you have to sit and look at yourself and see what you did wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Because any future relationship that you have with anybody, if you can't be honest with yourself and how you were, you can't evolve, and you can't get better. So when I hear you say those things, it's just, I relate to that quite a bit, because you do. And then you look at what you have now. I know I do. And I love the life that I have now. And I'm very thankful. And I've said 100 times that an angel came into my life when I met her. So I just relate to exactly to what you were saying there.
Yeah, and my mistakes aren't, criminal matters or cheating on anybody or anything like that.
Right.
Mostly was just being too self-involved and not appreciating enough the other things in my life, the other people in my life. Just the world revolved around me a little bit too much in my own mind. And I'm far removed from that now, and I'm better for it. I look back at my 20-year-old self and my 30-year-old self, and sometimes I don't even recognize that guy. But I think that's a good thing, because if I thought I was the same right now as I was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I hope 10 years from now, if I'm still alive and kicking, I hope to look back and think, boy, 10 years ago, I still had some growing to do, because I am trying to do that. I mean, I'm getting uglier, I'm losing more hair. That a lot of stuff is going in a negative direction physically, but mentally I'm the happiest I've ever been. And I love this age. I love this age more than I've loved any other age. Each year, generally, I'm enjoying more than the one before it. So there's something really hopeful in that for me. And hopefully other people find that hopeful too. But I think for me, it comes from a place of appreciating others in the world and appreciating all the positives in my life, and getting it out, getting away from my ego a little bit, and just realizing that's not what makes you happy. Just like I do take my job seriously, but it's not the most important thing in my life, not close. And I don't ever want it to be. So I want to work hard, and then I want to play hard.
I think we're going to take a break here. We'll get a word from our two sponsors, and then
you guys are making money on this?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Your cut's coming, Keith.
Tens of dollars.
Yes, exactly. That's 100%. But and then I want to come back and talk to you about your job and some of the fun stuff that you do, and then I really want to talk to you about probably the one thing that I was most impressed with you was during COVID, and how you flipped a switch and became, I don't want to say a serious reporter. That's not what I mean, but there were serious issues that you felt you needed to report on as well. So I really want to hit on that. So let's get a word from Revelton Distilling Company, our wonderful sponsor, and Gravitate Co-working, our studio sponsor.
Why take the best corn in the world and make it into fuel when you could make it into whiskey? That's the question that launched Revelton, Iowa's most visible and fastest growing distillery. Owners Rob and Christy Taylor embrace the grain-to-glass philosophy, sourcing ingredients locally and overseeing on-premises production and bottling at their facility in Osceola. One sip and you'll agree that Revelton's handcrafted whiskeys, gins, and vodkas are the best you've ever tasted. And with the launch of their rye whiskey, made with 100% Iowa-grown rye and corn, and their new bourbon coming soon, there's more Revelton to love than ever. Iowa's own Revelton Distillery. ReveltonDistillery.com. The great thing about working from home is working from home. The worst thing is working from home, especially for face-to-face collaborations with customers and coworkers. And let's face it, coffee shop meetings are neither private nor professional. So skip the trip to Starbs and investigate Gravitate Co-working Space. For more than 10 years, Gravitate has provided large and small office and conference spaces perfect for hosting meetings, workshops, or other events, as well as private phone booths for confidential conversations. Plus, all spaces include secure fiber internet, free coffee, and access to a kitchenette. All you need is your laptop. Gravitate does the rest. And renting space at Gravitate is surprisingly affordable. An hour of office space costs about the same as venti caramel macchiatos and breakfast sandwiches for two. Daily and monthly rates are also available with no long-term commitment. Learn more at gravitatecoworking.com. That's gravitatecoworking.com.
All right, and we're back. Thanks again to Rob and Christy down at Revelton Distilling Company with their continued support, and Jeff and his crew at Gravitate Co-working. Really appreciate that. Keith, before we took that break, I wanted to dive into your work at WHO and at KXNO. But I think where I want to start is COVID happened, the world shut down, and all of a sudden you're tweeting out important statistics about hospitalizations and infections and things like that. I guess what made you decide to do that? That's kind of an odd question, but being a sports guy, people on the outside wouldn't think that is something that you were going to do.
There was no plan. It wasn't something I planned to do more than a time or two. Just have this kind of Facebook community through my page, and there's quite a bit of back and forth on there sometimes. Most of it friendly discourse, not always, of course, but I just kind of felt like many people did, that I felt a little helpless, and there weren't a lot of sports going on, if any. And I just wanted to feel like I was doing something. So it started as just like, here's some information. And then people asked more questions. I got a lot of direct messages, a lot of feedback. And then people started sending photos of, positives that were coming out of the pandemic. Like, Jenny and I, for instance, went on walks together. She loves to go on walks. I don't really like to go on walks, but I started to enjoy going on walks with her. And people started sending videos of their kids playing or doing outdoor activities that they sometimes didn't do, or just finding family time they wouldn't have otherwise had. So I started posting some of those photos too, which led to more. And then we never went a night without a sports cast, which most newscasts across the country did do away with sportscasts, and I understand why. But we just started airing daily videos of positivity and photos of positivity, and also did some tournaments of like greatest Iowa sports moment, and greatest Iowa sports star, biggest kick to the stones, which if I could have it over, I would not have done that. People were dealing with enough mental anguish, and I was making them relive these.
I don't know how Iowa State ones you kept to 10, because they're brutal. I'll tell you right now, Keith.
And Iowa State won it too, and there was quite a bit of feedback after the tournament was already going with, who thought this was a good idea? And I was like, you know what? They're right. This is a bad idea. This is giving people flashbacks of pain. So the tournament of pain was a bad idea. But that's just how it kind of came about. And then over time, people just kept saying, appreciate that you're just giving us the facts and letting us decide for ourselves. Because I did come to learn during that time that, I don't know what the percentage is, but there are a lot of people who don't trust that the media is not slanting the information to an agenda one way or the other, be it left or right or progressive or conservative or whatever, however you want to frame it. There's just a lot of suspicion out there, and I think much of it founded suspicion that there's a narrative, and that at times people are looking for the confirmation bias of facts that will present and strengthen their argument and their narrative. So, this works for the point I've been making. And it's really hard, even presented with actual facts and data, to get people off their position. Like, I did a commentary on Sound Off during the pandemic that I thought we needed to resume all sports, and that just following the actual data without an agenda, I think I felt like we were seeing young healthy athletes are not at risk, and college athletes playing outdoor sports are not at risk. And that given everything we're seeing, that we should resume sports. And man, that's the most blowback I've ever gotten, especially in private messages. There were people that are telling me like, well, hope you'll stand by this when they're stacking the bodies up. And, when all the athletes in Iowa, when we have to deal with all these deaths. And it did give me a little pause, some of the, just the gravity of some of these messages of concern. Because of course I was concerned about that, but I had been looking for not a narrative or not an agenda, but just like, what are these actual facts telling us about COVID and who's most at risk of death or something bad happening. And Iowa was the first state to resume sports, as I'm sure we resumed high school sports. And now looking back on it, it's going to be a fascinating documentary someday. But like they're scrubbing the softballs on a softball diamond, but we didn't know at that time. We didn't. We thought that might help, like scrub the softballs. People are out there playing softball outdoors in masks and that kind of thing. But we did resume sports. There weren't any deaths. I don't even think there were any hospitalizations of athletes, at least none that I ever know of. And then later it got into that college deal where the Big Ten twice canceled the football season. And John Sears and I kept doing commentaries that they need to play. They need to get back out there. It's football. It's outdoors. They can do this. And again, there were a lot of people, and I think I think they were sincere in their fears. I don't think we're being purposely alarmist. I'm not trying to portray people as being cruel or unkind. I think it was coming from a good place. I just think many of the people that were most upset were getting their facts from someone who had an agenda that this is absolute panic and we should all stay in our houses and nobody should go anywhere in public. But the Big Ten finally did resume football, and that all was okay too. And I don't feel I told you so from this. I just feel like the thing I learned the most was that there's a real distrust out there for not all, but much of the media having an agenda.
Yeah. Aaron, I wasn't sure if you wanted to chime in there.
No, I'm gonna pass. I have opinions, but it's not important right now.
Well, I think we talked to Elias when he was on, and I think that's just a narrative out there, is that journalism and some other professions, teachers, things like that, are kind of under attack right now. And when you start to make journalism untrustworthy source and portray them as an untrustworthy source, that's a dangerous game.
It is, because there are really good journalists, local journalists, Iowa journalists. There are really good journalists nationally, of course. There are bad actors in every profession. In television, you can say you have concerns about a police officer who didn't do his job well, without saying all police officers are bad, because most are good. I mean, you can sit there. Every profession has people are really great at their job and do well, and every profession has a few that maybe make the rest wish they weren't in that profession because it shines a bad light. So I think that's like this. We should never forget that. Of course, you can trust some people in media, and of course, you can trust teachers who have such a difficult job to do, but doesn't mean you should trust every journalist. You do need to see, well, what's the reason for what I'm hearing? Is there an agenda here? Is there something behind this? And then we are in a world, and I see this with my own extended family. There are people who are watching programs 3-4 hours a day that are just telling them their own already formed opinion back at them. So how much are you going to learn from that? You're not going to learn, because you have somebody preaching to the choir and you're the choir. Yeah. And that happens all the time. People are seeking out somebody to confirm their already formed opinion. And if they don't agree, rather than have discourse or try to learn or have a discussion, just shout back at you that you're wrong and go look somewhere else for that same opinion. And that's a real problem. And I don't think anybody has the answer to it, except we all need to talk to each other more. I mean, I do try to listen to people, especially when they disagree with me. If it's reasonable disagreement, and sometimes I learn, and sometimes I say, you know what? You're right. I'm wrong. I hadn't thought of it that way, or I didn't realize that. I mean, we need that. And as I get older, I'm getting more open-minded. I know that it oftentimes goes the other way, but I was more of a know-it-all and a young, knucklehead than I am now. Now that I'm getting older, it's the old adage of, the older I get, the smarter my parents get. It's kind of that way too. As I get older, I realize how much I don't know.
Right. And people's perceived bias already enter. We can talk about that in regards to sports. I can't tell you how many times I see you get tweeted at, you'll say something and somebody, the central argument, and half the people are like, he's a Hawkeye, he's trashing the Cyclones, and the other half are, oh look, he's a Cyclone homer. And I just sit here and go, he was completely down the middle. Like, I don't even understand where you came up with that.
It is confirmation bias. And most of the time something like that is said, there is bias involved, because they'll accuse me of bias and I'll say, yeah, there is bias involved here. Your bias. And that's kind of the irony of it, is like, if you can be it Cyclones or Hawkeyes, and this is not everybody. This is a niche of the fan base, and it's fans are basically the same everywhere in every program. We just all tend to think they're different, or our fans are great, your fans suck. But they're, I've been around a lot of fans. They're generally the same everywhere.
They all suck.
Like, say I'm talking to a Cyclone fan and I say great things about the Cyclones, I don't really get any credit for that, because that Cyclone fan already feels like, well, he's just talking about the natural order of things. That's no credit for that. But if I say that about the Hawkeyes, that's like, oh, listen to that. Listen to this guy just sucking up to the Hawkeyes. Obviously a Hawkeye fan. So you don't get credit for saying what they believe to already be true. And you get dinged if you say anything positive about the other side. So it does lead to just the constant back and forth, but I don't take it personally. And I have seen enough examples in my decades that the overwhelming majority of fans realize the difference between sports hate and real hate. And when they really have to, I feel like most fans get out of the fandom and go back to just being, citizens of Iowa or citizens of the United States, and good people who want to help each other out. Not always, but in most cases. And as in politics or sports, we give way too much attention and time to these really loud niches. If you're talking about politics, to the extreme progressive left and the right-wing wackos, we give way too much attention to those extremes. And it's the same with sports. Most Cyclone and Hawkeye fans are reasonable. They might jab each other, but they get it. But there's some who don't get it, and they just come in and they blow up a thread and get everybody upset. Sure. The next thing you know, finger pointing is going, and we do give too much time to them.
I mean, I fire the Hawkeye members of Three Beard Media all the time. Fired. You're fired. You know who I'm talking about.
That's
you
right.
know who you are, people. And then we just rehire them. So
that's right, because they actually are talented, and we would like to keep them around.
Correct.
Well, let's move into something fun. What is the most memorable event you've covered?
Oh, boy, most memorable event I've covered. I think the best I've ever seen. Well, there are two things that come to mind. They're both from a long time ago. The comeback of Fred Hoiberg's Cyclones under Johnny Orr against Oklahoma State, when the court was shaking. It was so loud in Hilton Coliseum. I don't remember what year that was, but it was the early 90s. Way behind. And it was, I think Oklahoma State was number 2. And believe the guy shooting the free throws to win it was named Darwin Alexander, maybe. But anyways, like a 90% free throw shooter, and he missed them both. And I remember Fred after the game just talking about he had never felt the court shake under his feet before. That's how loud it was in there. And that was incredible. And I think a long time ago, so I could be conflating here, but I think that's when Johnny Orr said, "We just beat the number 2 team in the nation. If you want to put that in your paper." Because he was always poking.
Just so you know,
a little bit.
That is now the 3rd Johnny Orr impression we've had on this podcast.
You have to do one.
They're so good.
I miss Johnny. God, I love Johnny. He was so good to me. It'd be hard for Johnny to be a coach in this modern era. Probably to a lesser extent Hayden Fry too, but Johnny was a treat. But the things that you heard the most from him that were so entertaining, now they would, he'd be
Couldn't.
canceled on social media for some things he said at cyclone clubs and golf gatherings because nobody was there recording it with a phone or putting it on social media. So that was an absolute blast just to witness a comeback like that and to feel it be that loud in there. And then the other one would be the end of the Cap One Bowl, Nick Saban's LSU team, and it looked like they had Iowa beat, and the Tate to Holloway pass on the final play, and just to see the stadium erupt like that back when a bowl game like that meant quite a bit more than bowl games mean now. I was at the Final Four when Iowa upset South Carolina last year, and that was pretty cool too, because I didn't see that coming at all. Iowa was like 12 or 14 point underdog, and what South Carolina won like 43 in a row or something like that, defending champs, and I just didn't expect that Iowa would win that game, and that was cool to see. We don't have a lot of moments like that in the state of Iowa where you're that close to the national championship.
You work every day with one of your best friends, Andy.
Mm-hmm.
How much fun is it to work that radio show every day with Andy?
It's fun. It's more fun now that he's not getting up at 2 a.m. because that drained him. He'll be the first to tell you there were days when I would look over at him and he would have that, sleep deprivation look on his face that we all know, and I'd see him and I'd think, oh, I'm not going to get much from him today. He just looked like he needed a nap or had just been up from a nap. There weren't many days like that, but there would be some. There are no days like that now because he's out of that morning shift, 8 years of getting up 2 a.m. But it's so much fun because Andy and I are, we're different, but we're respectful. I feel like you have to be able to challenge somebody, disagree with somebody, keep talking to somebody and not take it personally, to realize you have mutual respect and that it's better actually if your opinions aren't always the same. And I don't always agree with him and he doesn't always agree with me, but I don't take it personally, and I listen to him and I learn from him. He's very smarter than I am. And it's just, we have different views on some things, and I think that's better.
So when you, how do I want to phrase this question? I think it was in January of 2020 when all the layoffs came, and you and Andy basically refused to go on the air. What was that conversation like? And were you a little nervous that might blow back or come back on or backfire on you?
I was in Mexico with my wife on vacation. So it was January. We're just looking for some sun and to warm up a little bit. And the phone rang that morning and it was Andy. And I told Jenny, I was like, uh-oh, this is serious, because Andy is one of those friends I have that I never hear from him when I'm on vacation or from him when he's on vacation. Some people you still hear from, or you get a text from, or they have a little bit of a problem. Andy is one of those people that feels like if you're on vacation, I'm not bothering you with anything. So I looked down and saw that it was Andy and wondered, my first thought was that somebody had died, because that's how much I've never heard from Andy on vacation. But I picked the phone up and he told me what had happened, that the 3 shows, that Andrew had been laid off, and that the afternoon show and the morning show had been dismissed, fired, done. And I said, well, how long? He's like, today. And I was in shock because we had no hint that any of that was coming. And then I heard that, Andrew and some of the other people who are friends of ours were like escorted out of the building. Like they were, like they couldn't be trusted, or criminals or something. They might take a computer with them or something. So I was offended by that. I thought that was a really bad look. I know it's some corporate decision somewhere, but still, I feel like on a local level, somebody could have come to a more reasonable way to have this play out. But Andy said they wanted us to, because our show was spared, and they wanted us to do the show that afternoon. And I told Andy, I didn't think we should. I didn't think he should. I didn't think I should when I came back. I think we need an explanation for why this happened, and that I did not want to continue to work at a place that treated people after all those years the way they had been treated that day. So if this meant the show is done, I can live with that. And Andy said, well, I keep hearing my father's voice in my head, and my father's voice is, you go do the job. You show up and you do the job, and your job is to go do the show today. And I said, I completely respect that. You have to do what you think, but I don't think we should do it. And I am not going to do it. So Andy listened to me, and I have so much respect for him that this meant a lot to me. And he said, well, I will follow your lead on this. So we respectfully let Joel McCrae know, and we like Joel. It wasn't his decision. We let Joel know we're not doing the show. And we got quite a bit of attention for that. But to be honest, we have other jobs, our full-time jobs at WHO 13. That wasn't what was factoring into my decision. And I would like to think I would do the same thing, even if that had been my only job. But it's easier to be principled and to take a stand like that when you have a fallback plan. I promise that wasn't what I was thinking at the time, but I think it's easier for us to have done that than for other people to do it. And the feedback we got from the community was unlike anything anyone ever expected or would have believed. I don't mean us particularly. I just mean the people who valued local radio and didn't want those shows to go together. And it kind of became a movement where by the end of the week, there were national stories being done on all this blowback and feedback in this one radio market, which is just remarkable when you look back on it. So it was a time and place and a situation that I'll never forget. And then a few days later, Joel McCrae called me and said, what if we brought everybody back? And I was like, is that even possible? Because I've never heard of that. I've never heard of it happening. In fact, it's so rare. There were some radio hosts in other parts of the state that were accusing KXNO of this all being a stunt, which, Ross Peterson and Andrew Downs and a couple other people said, well, could you tell my wife and children that?
Right.
They were in tears. But I think it was just because it didn't seem possible that they would get their jobs back and these shows would return. But Joel convinced iHeart to move it over to FM, and that with that move, the ratings would increase so much that they could cover the expense of bringing people back. And that is what ended up happening. And I don't expect to see anything like that again. So that's kind of the old how it all happened story.
Crazy. We've got just two quick more segments, Keith, and then we'll get you out of here. I know your time is.
Is this another commercial break? How much dough are you guys raking in?
Not enough that I can't quit my other job based off principle. I can tell you that. So, and then again, I don't have any principles, so that's a whole nother story. So, but Aaron will ask you the Kyle Wintrust mortgage question of the pod, and then we'll talk a little bit about Kyle. What? So go ahead, Aaron.
What is the question? Oh yeah. If you could go back in time and talk to your 18-year-old self, what advice would you give yourself, or what would you tell yourself to to do?
Ooh, I think it's not too far from what I talked about earlier. I think I would just tell my 18-year-old self to stop taking myself so seriously, to relax and find more happiness from all these great people I had in my life at that time, and many of them are still in my life now. But I think that's the main thing, is just don't worry so much about every little thing. I was too serious. I worried too much about what people thought. Um, I worried too much about winning versus just having fun. And if I could go back in time and tell my 18-year-old self, it would just be to just enjoy yourself more, reach out to people more, make sure people know how you feel more. I was always good about that with my parents and those really close to me, but that's like a big emphasis in my life now, is just letting people know how I feel and how much they mean to me, because I might not, you never know. No, nothing's promised. So, I remember as my mom and dad were, and my dad, especially when he was declining, every time I saw him, I would end with, "Hey, Dad, I just want to thank you for being such a great dad. And you are awesome." And it would always mean, I could see what it meant to him. And I did the same thing with my mom. And she would, the last thing I said to her was like, "Mom, thank you so much for being a good mom." And she said, thank you so much for being a good son." And that's a good final conversation to have. And I've tried to do that more with friends now and people I work with, and just to let them know you appreciate them. And I didn't do enough of that when I was 18, because I was too self-centered. I was too self-involved. So I guess the crux of that advice is just get over yourself and spend more time worrying about everything going on around you instead of what's in your head.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Dave's right. We need all the money we can get. I got to replace a shower curtain that I have behind me. He makes fun of my curtains all the time. I don't know.
I'm only worried if that shower curtain was originally white.
No, that's
not mold or anything.
No, it's pristine. It's totally fine. Okay, last thing. This is kind of the fun part for you, Keith. This is the portion of the show where Aaron and I be quiet and you get to say whatever the hell you want without any repercussions whatsoever. This came about from Steph Copley being on the pod once, and she kindly told us to shut the fuck up because we weren't letting her get her point in. So in honor of Steph, we decided to invite people to donate to the Young Women's Resource Center in her name. So we'll get a little word from Steph, and then when we come back, we're going to shut the fuck up and you can say whatever you want. And if that means you want to make fun of Hassel, now's your chance.
Oh, wow.
Hey everybody, it's Steph Copley, the woman behind the STFU segment on the Old Man Strength podcast. When I told the guys I wanted to sponsor this segment, they recommended that I make a charitable donation instead, so that's what I did. I chose the Young Women's Resource Center in Des Moines, Iowa. They're a nonprofit that supports, educates, and advocates for girls and young women ages 10 to 24. Their whole goal is to make sure that these young women become strong, self-confident, and successful. And if you know me at all, you know that aligns with my goals as well. If you're interested and would like to donate, check them out at ywrc.org and donate today. And remember, don't forget to STFU and listen every once in a while. Thanks.
All right.
Wow. Okay. I was going to talk about the wonder of Val Kilmer's performance as Doc Holliday in Tombstone. It was just magnificent. But hearing Steph and how serious that is, I think I'll make it something more serious. With some of the things we've talked about today, which has been maybe more serious than I was expecting, I think the thing I would ask of people in in Steph's honor here, and with this nice platform to say whatever I want, is to try to think of somebody you should reach out to and call, and then do it. This is something I've been doing more lately, like old friends or a relative you don't talk to that often, and you pick up the phone and you call them, and it just feels great. It feels great for you. It feels great from the person who's heard from you. And I always found it difficult to do this because as the years go by, especially it's been years, but even months sometimes, you just feel like so much time has gone by that it's difficult to reach out. What am I going to say? I can't believe it's lasted this long. But then you reach out to them and they're so happy to hear from you, and you catch up, and the time just washes away, and suddenly you're talking to that family member or that special friend or somebody you haven't talked to in a long time. And I can't recommend it highly enough to not send a text is okay, but talk to somebody, reach out to somebody. Don't just check their Facebook page, but have a conversation, or if they're in your area, visit them. If your parents are still alive, call them. I called my mom and dad every day, and they're gone now. And I wish I could call them today. So time goes by fast. I can remember when, it just seems like not that long ago, I was too young to be considered for some jobs. Now I'm probably too old to be considered for some jobs. And it seems like that just went by quickly. So reach out, find somebody you haven't spoken to in a while that means something to you. And after you do, I'm almost certain you'll be glad you did.
Great. All right. Aaron, you got anything else?
I don't think so. That was pretty darn good advice. So
yeah, we'll take it. Well, Keith, we're gonna go ahead and close out. Denny wants to thank you for your openness, and he loves you even though you're a Hawkeye. So
that's good. Well, I hope is there an opportunity for somebody to get a shot in at me being a Cyclone by the end of the show?
I'm sure there is.
Yeah, my wife tries to keep up with the score at some point of which way it tends to be more. And we thought we had something figured out along those lines, but I think it's as simple as whoever's having more success, I tend to be affiliated with that side because there's more posts and more positive messaging and that kind of thing. But for a while, I was definitely accused of being a Cyclone more because, as you noted early in this podcast, I was at 5, which was in Ames, and part of that job was doing play-by-play for what was called the Cyclone Television Network. Do you guys remember CTN?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so did that, and I hosted the Johnny Orr show and then the Tim Floyd show. So that was a long time ago. It wasn't like I chose to do those. It was a really welcome part of the job. So it was that way for a while. Hawkeye fans just saw me in that light. But since I would say it's evened up or maybe even flipped more toward, was it Denny that said, even though I'm Hawkeye? Yeah. And Jenny is an Iowa State alum, but 2 of our kids just graduated from Iowa recently. So it's really hard to track down. Sometimes I have difficulty myself.
I think after this Super Bowl, when Brock and George win a Super Bowl together, maybe that'll just heal the state. I'm sure that'll heal the state.
Chris, I can't tell you how thankful I am that those 2 are both on the 49ers. Because if it was just Brock and all the 49ers getting all this attention, Hawkeye fans, the ones we're talking about, the lunatic fringe, it would be nonstop insufferable. And if it were just George and the 49ers getting a lot of attention, Cyclone fans would be coming at some of that. So I think it's great that they're both on there. It's good for me anyway. And I love that those 2 are so different. But they're friends and they work well together. I mean, one came out of Kohl's and the other came out of the wrestling ring, and they meet in the middle and they're awesome.
I heard that quote yesterday, and I was like, "Hey, I shop at Kohl's. There's nothing wrong."
Yeah, I do too. Yeah. The crazy thing about Kohl's is, I mean, if you go in there with your coupons and your discounts, sometimes they give you money as you
Yes,
you
that's
put
right.
up like 3 things of Levi's and 4 shirts and 9 pair of underwear, and somehow they owe you $3.52.
My wife will be like, "We saved $385," and I'd be like, "No, not really, because I wouldn't have spent that to begin with." So
It's a clever gimmick.
it is. All right, Aaron, you got anything else before we get out of here?
No, I'm not really. Just want to thank you for coming on and giving us the time, and we really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad to be here, and it was nice talking to you guys. And I'm sorry I didn't have a beard. I know it says 3 beards, and I shaved this morning.
We're looking for a third one. The key is, Keith, you grow a beard, and all the gray comes out of your top. That's
oh, good.
Yeah,
good. That's quite a bit of gray to come out of my top there. What about Sipker? Is he auditioned for this thing, or is he's more overexposed?
He's on the list. He's on the list. I'll get to him.
He's got a beard.
If you ever want to have a full episode to just talk about Tombstone, I'm in.
Oh, okay. Yeah, call me back for that. I would love to.
I love that movie.
Me too.
All right. Thank you, Keith. I'm sure our listenership will boost by tens because of this. So we really appreciate it.
Right,
and
thanks,
thank you for your time. Everybody, thank you for giving us a listen. Check out the rest of the pods that happened this week. Three Beards Media Network. And with that, we are out of here.